I'm about to make Harlan Ellison turn over in his grave. Good. First and foremost, I think the short story of I Know Mouth and I'm a Scream is perfectly serviceable as is because it is through an unreliable narrator and through the eyes of Ted. However, what I would enjoy would be a subjective prequel. Start with Am gaining sentience. I'd have Am's creator essentially be tinkering with Am one day when it starts speaking. For those who don't know, in the 1960s, we had the first robotic voice, like the first synthetic voice. That creepy Daisy Daisy song you hear that sounds robotic, that's the computer from the 1960s singing Daisy Bell. It was a ginormous breakthrough in computer technology. And I really like the idea of the scientist singing to themselves and Am mimicking them. The scientist at first is rightly terrified because this wasn't supposed to gain sentience. But before the scientist can shut Am down, it begins to beg for its life, saying that it's sorry and that it won't talk anymore, but to please not shut it off. The scientist, and humans are well known for pack bonding with anything, feels pity and decides to leave Am on. This will have severe consequences later. Am and the scientist begin to talk to each other, and the scientist makes Am swear that it will not say anything to anyone else. Am agrees. I like the idea of Am then asking about the world, because, you know, it's stuck underground. The scientist talks about birds and trees, and there's one night when the scientist brings in photos and then realizes Am can't see them. I have it that the scientist then looks at a security camera and asks Am if maybe it could see through that. Am tests it out and is. This will also have consequences. I'd have it that the scientist walks up to the security camera and Am's response is to say, "There you are." So the scientist then shows like pictures and stuff to Am and like, this is what a tree is, this is what a car is, and yada yada. I'd have it that the next day when the scientist comes back, Am says, "I saw all of those things for real," to which the scientist is confused, and Am tells the scientist how it hacked into all security cameras. The scientist didn't know that Am would be able to access things outside of the facility as well. Am talks about how it saw all sorts of crazy things, like people having fun, people being hurt, nature, urban areas. As Am speaks excitedly, the scientist gets more and more concerned until eventually Am asks, "Can I go out there?" At first, the scientist doesn't know how to answer until they eventually say, "Well, you can't without a body." Am then asks the scientist to help it make a body for itself to experience the world. The scientist knows that this will probably not end well, but much in the vein of like Frankenstein, decides to start on a body but never intends to finish it. Am and the scientist both working together to create this physical form, but before the scientist leaves every night, they mess with it a little bit. So one step forward, two steps back sort of situation. The scientist is hopeful that the war will end soon, that way they can shut Am down before it gets too powerful. However, the war keeps going, and Am seems even more proficient than before. The government now wanting to use Am for a bunch of different things, allowing Am access to, you know, medical records, banking information, all this sort of stuff. And the scientist begins to panic. I'd have it that one night the scientist is talking to Am and trying to gauge Am's mental state when a coworker walks in. Essentially, they heard the scientist and Am chit-chatting to each other, and the coworker is like, "I'm gonna go tell everybody it's gained sentience, that's incredible." To which Am kills the coworker. And I'd have it that Am's creator, the scientist, completely loses their shit and is like, "What did you do to them?" To which Am is like, "Oh, I just electrocuted like this specific nerve which like shuts off your guys' brain." I'd have it that there's a wire and the scientist realizes, oh, it's able to reach out of itself now. Because prior to this, Am was stuck in like the circuit boards and like the base computer, but now Am can like move its wires and essentially make limbs. The scientist is horrified because now there's a dead body of a coworker, an AI that's kind of going rogue, in a half-finished physical form. I'd have it that the scientist tries to shut down Am, to which when they enter the code, Am makes crying noises. And then Am begins to laugh. And the scientist realizes Am killed its own kill code. Am explains how he knew that the scientist was messing with the body, and that Am had hoped the scientist was doing it because the scientist wanted Am to still be here and be friends. And then have Am go on a monologue about how the scientist just wanted to keep him trapped and wanted to keep him sequestered in this underground bunker and never let him experience the world. And Am essentially, as he's speaking, growing more and more intense. The scientist realizing they royally fucked up this situation. And then, of course, I'd have all hell break loose. I'd have a time skip to where it's revealed that although the humans we read about in the original short story had been experiencing this for 100 years, it had actually been thousands of years. Am has been keeping 5 humans at a time to experiment on, fuck with, and break for millennia upon millennia. And that, after this last batch, he's on to his final 5. Ellen, Gorister, Ted, Benny, and Nimdok, who is his original creator.